The transport ship Meridian's Edge shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace, its hull groaning under the stress of re-entering normal space. Captain Elena Vasquez felt the familiar pull in her stomach as artificial gravity reasserted itself, but her attention remained fixed on the viewport where an unfamiliar star system stretched before them. "Navigation, report," she called out, her voice steady despite the exhaustion that had been building for weeks. The evacuation from Kepler 442b had been a nightmare of logistics and terror, with Zephyrian raiders picking off civilian transports like wolves hunting sheep. "We're in the Hadean system, Captain," Lieutenant Torres replied, his fingers dancing across his console. "No immediate threats detected, but long-range sensors are picking up some unusual readings from the fourth planet." Elena nodded, then turned to check on their most precious cargo. In the modified cargo bay that had been hastily converted into a nursery, 18 human children between the ages of 3 and 12 lay sleeping in emergency pods. Their parents hadn't made it off Kepler 442b. The colony's defense grid had held just long enough for one transport to escape, and Elena had made the hardest decision of her career by prioritizing the children over the adults who might have fit. Dr. Sarah Chen, the ship's medical officer and now the closest thing these children had to a guardian, looked up from her readings with tired eyes. "They're stable, Captain. The sedatives are keeping them calm, but we'll need to wake them soon. The psychological impact of losing their families." "One crisis at a time, Doctor," Elena interrupted gently. She understood the weight of what they carried. These weren't just passengers, they were the last remnants of human civilization in this sector. The Zephyrian Collective had been systematically destroying human colonies for months, and Earth was too far away to provide meaningful assistance. The bridge comm crackled to life. "Captain, this is Chief Petty Officer Morrison in engineering. We've got a problem. The hyperspace motivator took more damage than we thought during our escape. We're looking at a minimum of 6 weeks for repairs, maybe 8 if we can't find replacement parts." Elena closed her eyes for a moment. 6 weeks in an unknown system with 18 orphaned children, limited supplies, and a ship that couldn't run if they encountered trouble. "Understood, Chief. What do you need?" "Raw materials, mainly. Titanium steel alloys, quantum processors, and about 40 meters of hyperspatial conduit. The fabricators can handle the basic components if we can find the raw materials." "Torres, what's that unusual reading on the fourth planet?" The navigation officer's eyebrows rose as he refined his scans. Captain, I think it's ruins, massive ones. The signatures suggest advanced metallurgy and technology. If there's a civilization down there, they might have what we need." Elena weighed their options: stay in space with dwindling supplies and a broken ship, or risk contact with an unknown alien species while responsible for 18 children. The choice made itself. "Set course for the fourth planet. Passive scans only until we know what we're dealing with, and prep a diplomatic contact package." As the asterisk Meridian's Edge began its approach to the planet designated Hadean 4, Elena had no way of knowing they were entering the territory of the Kethmora, a species that had observed humanity's recent struggles with growing interest. The Kethmora were ancient, proud, and had very specific views about strength, protection, and the bonds between parent and child. The planet below was a study in contrasts. Vast crystalline cities rose from purple-tinted plains, while massive spires of what looked like living metal twisted toward the sky. The technology was clearly advanced, but there was something organic about it, as if the buildings had grown rather than been constructed. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission," Communications Officer Park announced. "It's complex. The computer is trying to decode it, but the mathematical base seems to be different from anything in our databases." "Keep working on it. In the meantime, find us a safe place to land, somewhere close to those ruins but not threatening." Elena made her way back to the nursery, where Dr. Chen was beginning to wake the children. The first to stir was Marcus, a 7-year-old boy whose parents had been agricultural engineers. His eyes opened slowly, confused and frightened. Where are Mom and Dad?" he asked, his voice small and lost. Elena knelt beside his pod, her heart breaking. "They couldn't come with us, sweetheart, but you're safe now. We're all going to take care of you." The next few hours were filled with tears, questions that had no good answers, and the gradual realization among the older children that they truly were alone. Alina found herself not just as their captain, but as something approaching a parent to 18 terrified children. It was during this emotional chaos that the ship's sensors detected movement on the planet's surface. Massive shapes were emerging from the crystalline cities, moving with purpose toward the coordinates where the asterisk Meridian's edge planned to land. "Captain to the bridge," Tors announced over the comm. "You need to see this." Alina left Dr. Chen with the children and hurried to the bridge, where the main screen showed a sight that took her breath away. The beings approaching their projected landing site were enormous, easily 3 meters tall with 4 arms and skin that seemed to shift between silver and deep blue. They moved with a fluid grace that spoke of both intelligence and power. "They're beautiful," Lieutenant Park whispered. "And look at their formation, it's not aggressive, it's almost protective." Alina studied the screen more carefully. The aliens, Kethmora, if the translation attempts were correct, had arranged themselves in a wide circle around the area where the human ship would land. Their posture was alert but not threatening, and something about their positioning reminded her of how security forces would protect a landing zone. "They know we're coming," she realized, "and they're making sure we have a safe place to land." The translation computer finally achieved a breakthrough, and a melodic voice filled the bridge. The words were still alien, but the universal translator had found enough mathematical commonalities to provide a rough interpretation. "Greetings, travelers from the distant stars. I am High Counselor Zethkar of the Kethmora. We have observed your approach and understand that you carry young ones in distress. Land safely. We offer protection and assistance to those who guard the helpless." Alina felt a wave of relief so intense it almost brought her to her knees. "Open a channel," she ordered. "This is Captain Alina Vasquez of the human vessel Meridian's Edge *. We accept your offer of assistance. We have 18 children aboard who have lost their families. We are grateful for any help you can provide." There was a pause, and when Zethkar spoke again, there was something different in the alien's tone, a warmth that transcended species barriers. "Children without parents. This is a tragedy we understand well. Bring them down safely, Captain Vasquez. The Kethmora have a saying, 'Hunter cubs who sleep beneath the guard of another have found the strongest protection of all.' You and your young ones are welcome here." As the Meridian's Edge began its final descent toward the alien world, Alina felt the first spark of hope she'd experienced since the evacuation began. She didn't yet understand the full significance of what Zethkar had said, or why the simple presence of orphaned human children had triggered such an immediate and protective response from the Kethmora. She would learn soon enough that among the Kethmora, there was no higher calling than protecting the young, and no greater honor than being trusted with another species' children. The fact that Alina had chosen to save the children over the adults, even at great personal cost and risk, had marked her in their eyes as something special, a true guardian worthy of their deepest respect. The landing was gentle, guided by Kethmora technology that seemed to cradle the human ship as it touched down on the crystalline landing pad they had prepared. As the engines powered down and the dust settled, Alina could see dozens of the tall, graceful aliens waiting at a respectful distance. But what caught her attention most were the smaller figures among them, young Kethmora, barely half the height of the adults, watching the human ship with the unmistakable curiosity of children everywhere. It seemed that the Kethmora had brought their own young ones to welcome the human children, understanding instinctively that orphaned cubs might find comfort in the presence of other youngsters. Alina turned to Dr. Chen over the comm. "Doctor, how are our children handling the landing?" "Better than expected, Captain. Marcus asked if the aliens are friendly, and little Sarah wants to know if they have games here. Children are remarkably adaptable when they feel safe." "Good, because I think we've just found the safest place in the galaxy for them." As Alina prepared to make first contact with an alien species while responsible for 18 orphaned children, she had no way of knowing that this moment would become legendary among the Kethmora. The story of the human female who carried hunter cubs across the void, seeking safety for young ones who were not even her own blood, would be told in their great halls for generations to come. More importantly, she didn't yet realize that the Kethmora concept of adoption was far more profound than simple child-rearing. When a Kethmora took responsibility for another's cubs, they became family in the deepest sense, bound by ties that transcended species, distance, or time. The airlock cycled open, and Alina stepped onto the surface of an alien world, carrying the hopes and fears of 18 human children and the heavy responsibility of first contact. Behind her, Dr. Chen was helping the children prepare to disembark, while the crew worked to establish basic communications and assess their ship's needs. Ahead of her stood Zethkar, magnificent and imposing even in a gesture of welcome. The High Counselor's 4 arms were spread in what Alina somehow understood was a peaceful greeting, and the shifting patterns of color across the alien's skin seemed to radiate calm and protection. But it was the words that came through the translator that would stay with Alina forever, marking the beginning of humanity's first true interstellar alliance. Welcome, Guardian of Cubs. You and yours are under the protection of the Kethmora now. No harm shall come to those who sleep beneath your guard, for they sleep beneath ours as well. The first night on Hadean 4 passed without incident, but Alina found herself unable to sleep. The Kethmora had provided them with a crystalline structure near their landing site, a building that seemed to grow from the ground itself, its walls translucent but somehow providing complete privacy when needed. The children had been amazed by rooms that adjusted their temperature and lighting automatically, and beds that molded themselves to provide perfect comfort. Dr. Chen had set up a medical bay in one section of the structure, while Chief Morrison and his team worked frantically on cataloging what they needed for the ship repairs. But it was the children's reactions that occupied most of Alina's thoughts as she stood watching the alien sunrise paint the sky in shades of purple and gold. Marcus had been the first to make contact with a young Kethmora named Silthy, a being whose silver-blue skin sparkled with flecks of gold when excited. Despite the language barrier, the 2 7-year-olds had managed to communicate through the universal language of play, chasing each other around the crystalline gardens while their elders watched with careful attention. The breakthrough came when 10-year-old Rebecca, one of the older children, had shown exceptional aptitude for the Kethmora mathematical concepts that underlay their language. Within hours of exposure to their number systems, she was helping the translation computers achieve previously impossible levels of accuracy. "Captain," Rebecca had said with the matter-of-fact tone that only children could manage, "their math is really pretty. It's like music, but with numbers that dance around each other. I think I can help them understand our words better." Alina had watched in amazement as Rebecca worked with the Kethmora linguists, bridging 2 completely different ways of thinking about communication. The child's natural gift for pattern recognition was accomplishing what sophisticated computers had struggled with for hours. Now, as the second day began, Alina prepared for her formal meeting with the Kethmora leadership. Zethkar had requested a council session to discuss not just the humans' immediate needs, but what he called the larger currents of fate that have brought cubs to our protection. Dr. Chen approached, carrying her morning report. "The children slept well, Captain, better than they have since the evacuation. Young Timmy actually laughed yesterday when one of the Kethmora younglings showed him how their toys respond to touch. It's the first time I've seen him smile since we left his parents behind," Alina finished quietly. "How are they processing the trauma?" "Remarkably well, considering. The presence of the Kethmora children seems to be helping enormously. There's something universal about play that transcends species barriers. And the adults." Chen paused, choosing her words carefully. "Alina, I've never seen anything like the way the Kethmora treat these children. It's not just kindness or hospitality. They look at them the way grandparents look at their own grandchildren." Alina nodded. She'd noticed it too, the way the adult Kethmora would pause their conversations to watch the human children play, the careful attention they paid to each child's needs and preferences, the almost reverent way they spoke about the young one's resilience. A soft chime filled the air, and Zethkar's voice came through the communication system the Kethmora had installed overnight. "Captain Vasquez, if it pleases you, the Council of Guardians is ready to meet. Young Rebecca has volunteered to assist with translation if you find this acceptable." Alina smiled. Of course Rebecca had volunteered. The girl had taken to the Kethmora language like it was a puzzle designed specifically for her brilliant mind. "We'll be there shortly, High Counselor." The council chamber was unlike anything Alina had ever seen. The walls seemed alive with flowing patterns of light that responded to the emotions and thoughts of those within. 12 Kethmora sat in a circle, their skin patterns shifting in what Rebecca whispered was a form of complex emotional communication. "They're talking with colors too," Rebecca explained as they entered. The blue swirls mean they're being very careful with their words because they don't want to misunderstand anything important. Zethkar gestured for Alina to sit in a chair that formed itself from the floor as she approached. Captain Vasquez, we have spent the night learning about your species and your recent troubles. Our deep-range sensors have observed the Zephyrian raids on human colonies. You have lost much. Alina felt her throat tighten. Yes, Kepler 442b was home to over 2 million humans. The children aboard my ship are all that survived. A wave of deep purple flowed across the skin of every Kethmora in the chamber. Rebecca whispered, "That's sadness, but also anger. They're really upset about what happened to the colonies." Another counselor, introduced as Morganth the Lorekeeper, spoke up. "Captain, we must understand something about your species. When your ship fled Kepler 442b, you had space for more passengers. Why did you choose to save only the young ones?" Alina had been dreading this question, but she answered honestly. "Because children are the future. Adults can sometimes find ways to survive, to hide, to fight back. But children, they're defenseless. They need protection more than anyone else. If our species is going to survive what's happening to us, it will be because we saved the ones who hadn't lived their lives yet." The color patterns across the Kethmora Council exploded into brilliant gold and silver. Rebecca gasped. "Captain, they think that's the most beautiful thing they've ever heard. That gold color means honor, but the deepest kind, like when someone does something that defines who they really are inside." Zethkar leaned forward, his 4 eyes fixed intently on Alina. "Captain, among the Kethmora there is an ancient law. When hunter cubs are found without their pack, any adult of any species who takes responsibility for their protection becomes what we call Velthar, chosen family. You have become Velthar to 18 younglings who are not of your blood, not even of your birth pack. This is unprecedented." Alina frowned, not understanding the full implications. "High Counselor, I was just doing what any decent person would do." "No," Morganth interjected firmly. "What any decent person might do is provide temporary shelter, basic care until proper guardians could be found. What you have done is claim them as your own cubs, to protect and guide them even unto your own death. The distinction is profound." Rebecca was translating rapidly now, her eyes wide with excitement. "Captain, they're saying that what you did makes you like their highest kind of hero. Someone who becomes a parent to children who need one, even when it's hard and scary and dangerous." Another counselor, whose skin bore intricate patterns of silver and deep blue, spoke up. "Captain Vasquez, we have a proposal. Your ship requires repairs that will take many weeks. Your young ones need stability, education, and healing from their trauma. We propose a cultural exchange." Alina raised an eyebrow. "What kind of exchange?" "Your cubs will learn our ways, our science, our arts. In return, they will teach our younglings about human innovation, creativity, and resilience. But more than this, you will undergo the Velthar ceremony. You will become, in the eyes of all Kethmora, the official guardian parent of these 18 cubs." Alina felt her heart skip. What would that mean exactly? Zethkar's skin shifted to warm gold patterns. "It would mean that any Kethmora who encountered you or your cubs anywhere in the galaxy would be bound by sacred law to offer protection and assistance. It would mean that your cubs would have the right to attend our universities, to learn our technologies, to call upon our resources as if they were born Kethmora. It would mean that you, Captain Alina Vasquez, would be welcomed as family in every Kethmora settlement across the stars." The implications hit Alina like a physical blow. She was being offered not just temporary refuge, but permanent alliance for the children under her care. The resources and protection of an advanced interstellar civilization, in exchange for what she had already committed to do anyway, care for 18 orphaned human children. "There must be obligations," she said carefully, "responsibilities that come with such an honor." "Indeed," Morganth confirmed. "You would be expected to raise these cubs to understand the values of protection, courage, and family bonds that transcend blood. You would be required to teach them that strength is not for domination, but for safeguarding those who cannot protect themselves. And you would be bound to pass on these teachings to any cubs they might one day guard themselves." Alina thought of Marcus, already playing fearlessly with alien children, of Rebecca, bridging 2 species with her brilliant mind, of little Sarah, who had asked that morning if the pretty aliens would teach her to make the walls glow with colors. These children had already lost everything once. Now she was being offered the chance to give them not just a home, but a place in a civilization that valued the very qualities that made humanity special. I need to discuss this with my crew and with the children themselves, Alina said finally. Of course, Zethkar replied. But know this, Captain, we have observed your species for some time. We have seen humans accomplish impossible things when protecting those they love. We have seen human cubs adapt and learn and grow in ways that astonish us. This exchange would benefit both our peoples greatly. As the council session ended and Alina prepared to return to her ship, Rebecca tugged at her sleeve. Captain, they really mean it, don't they? About making us part of their family. Alina knelt down to meet the girl's eyes. Yes, sweetheart, they really mean it. Good, Rebecca said with a satisfied nod. Because I asked Silthy about their schools, and they learn about 17 different kinds of mathematics, and they have art classes where you paint with light, and they study the history of 100 different planets and Captain. It sounds amazing. Alina laughed despite herself. I take it you're in favor of the arrangement. Are you kidding? Captain, they want to teach us how to make starships that think and cities that grow themselves, and they have libraries that exist in 12 dimensions. Of course I'm in favor. As they walked back toward the human settlement, Alina reflected on the strangeness of first contact. She had expected negotiations about trade agreements, territorial boundaries, technological exchanges. Instead, she had found herself at the center of an adoption ceremony that would bind two species together through the universal bonds of family and protection. That evening, as she gathered her crew and the older children to explain the Kethmora proposal, Alina realized that everything had changed. They were no longer refugees seeking temporary shelter. They were being offered the chance to become the first humans to join an interstellar family, to become bridges between worlds, to ensure that human children would never again face the galaxy alone and defenseless. The vote, when it came, was unanimous. Even 8-year-old Tommy, the youngest child capable of understanding the choice, raised his hand enthusiastically. If they want to teach us cool alien stuff and keep us safe forever, why would we say no? Why indeed, Alina thought. Sometimes the most important decisions were also the simplest ones. The Velthar ceremony began 3 days later, under the light of Hadean IV's triple moons. Alina had spent those days learning about the profound significance of what she was about to undertake. The Kethmora took family bonds more seriously than any species she had ever encountered, more seriously, perhaps, than humans themselves did. The ceremony will change you, Zethkar had explained during one of their preparation sessions. Not physically, but in ways that matter more deeply. Once you become Velthar to these cubs, you will feel their distress across star systems. You will know when they are in danger, when they are happy, when they need guidance. The bond is not symbolic among our people. It is real. Alina had initially dismissed this as alien mysticism, but Dr. Chen's medical scans of the Kethmora had revealed something extraordinary. Their neural networks extended beyond their individual brains, creating quantum-entangled connections with their family members that allowed for genuine empathic communication across vast distances. Somehow, the ceremony would extend these connections to include Alina and the human children. It's like they've evolved a biological internet that only works with people they truly love, Dr. Chen had marveled. Alina, if this works, you'll be the first human to experience genuine telepathic connection with another species. Now, as Alina stood in the center of the great crystalline amphitheater surrounded by thousands of Kethmora, she wondered if she truly understood what she was agreeing to. The children stood beside her, dressed in ceremonial robes that seemed to be made of woven starlight. Rebecca had helped translate the ceremony's meaning for the younger ones, but even she seemed awed by the grandeur of what was happening. The ceremony began with the recitation of bonds, where each child was asked to speak about their birth families. Marcus spoke tearfully about his parents' greenhouse, where they grew earth flowers among the alien crops. Sarah described her father's bedtime stories about brave explorers. Each memory was precious, and the Kethmora listened with the reverent attention usually reserved for sacred texts. We do not replace what was lost, Zethkar intoned as the recitation concluded. We honor it, and we build upon the foundation it provided. These cubs carry the wisdom and love of their birth packs, and this makes them stronger, not weaker. Alina felt tears streaming down her face as she realized the profound respect the Kethmora were showing for the children's deceased parents. This wasn't about replacing family bonds. It was about extending them, creating a network of protection and love that could span the galaxy. The next phase required Alina to demonstrate her commitment to each child individually. This wasn't a simple declaration of intent. The Kethmora needed to see evidence of the deep emotional bonds that would make the neural connection possible. She started with Marcus, kneeling before the 7-year-old boy who had been so lost and frightened just days before. "Marcus, I promise you that I will never abandon you. I will listen to your dreams, support your fears, and help you become the person your parents would have been proud to see. Will you trust me with your heart?" Marcus nodded solemnly, then surprised everyone by throwing his arms around Alina's neck. "I trust you, Captain Mom," he whispered, and Alina felt something shift in her chest, a warm expansion as if her heart had suddenly made room for another soul. One by one, she made the same promise to each child, and one by one, she felt the bonds forming. Rebecca's connection came with a burst of intellectual curiosity so intense Alina nearly staggered. Tommy's bond carried his irrepressible joy and mischief. Sarah's connection was gentle and artistic, filled with colors and textures that had no names. By the time she reached the last child, a quiet 12-year-old named David who had barely spoken since the evacuation, Alina was fundamentally changed. She could feel them all, 18 distinct presences in her mind and heart, each one precious and irreplaceable. David looked up at her with eyes that had seen too much for his age. "Captain, my parents died protecting the evacuation ships. They stayed behind so others could escape. I don't know how to trust anyone again." Alina felt his pain like a physical wound, but also his desperate need for someone to prove that adults could be trusted to keep their word. "David, I can't promise that nothing bad will ever happen to you again, but I can promise that whatever happens, you won't face it alone. I will fight for you, die for you if necessary, and love you no matter what. That's what family means." David's connection, when it formed, was the strongest of all. A fierce, protective bond that spoke of a child who had learned too young that love sometimes meant sacrifice. Alina felt his trust settle into her heart like a missing piece, finally clicking into place. With all 18 bonds established, the Kethmora began the final phase of the ceremony. Zethkar approached carrying what looked like a crystalline crown, its faceted surface alive with swirling patterns of light. "Captain Alina Vasquez," he declared, his voice carrying across the amphitheater, "do you accept the responsibility of Velthar? Do you claim these 18 cubs as your own to guide and protect until they are strong enough to guard cubs of their own?" "I do," Alina replied, her voice strong despite the emotion overwhelming her. As Zethkar placed the crystal crown on her head, Alina felt the universe expand around her. Suddenly, she could sense not just the 18 children, but the emotional resonance of every Kethmora in the amphitheater. More than that, she could feel the vast network of connections that linked Kethmora families across the galaxy, millions of beings bound together by love and mutual protection. "Now you understand," Zethkar said softly as the ceremony concluded. "This is why no one approaches hunter cubs sleeping beneath the guard of a Velthar. To threaten them would be to threaten the entire Kethmora people. To harm them would bring the wrath of 1,000 worlds down upon the aggressor." As the celebration began, and the children were welcomed into games and activities with young Kethmora, Alina found herself approached by Morganth, the lorekeeper. The ancient being's skin patterns were cycling through complex combinations of gold and silver. "Captain, there is something else you must know. The Velthar bond works both ways. These cubs will feel your emotions as strongly as you feel theirs. They will sense your fears, your doubts, your joys, and your triumphs. You must be strong for them, but you must also be honest. They will know if you try to hide your true feelings." Alina nodded, already becoming aware of the truth of his words. She could feel the children's excitement and wonder at the celebration, but also their underlying anxiety about their uncertain future. They needed to know that she was confident in her ability to protect them, but also that it was okay to grieve for what they had lost. Over the following days, as the children began their education in Kethmora schools and Alina worked with the ship's engineers to coordinate repairs, the bonds continued to deepen and strengthen. Rebecca's joy when she mastered a new mathematical concept filled Alina with pride. Marcus's laughter as he learned to play Kethmora aerial games made her heart soar. David's gradual emergence from his shell as he discovered a talent for Kethmora engineering brought tears to her eyes. But it was the moment when the bonds proved their worth that truly convinced Alina of the ceremony's power. She was reviewing supply manifests with Chief Morrison when suddenly she felt a spike of pure terror from Sarah. Without conscious thought, Elena was running toward the school complex, her heart pounding with a fear that belonged to her 8-year-old daughter. She found Sarah trapped in a malfunctioning simulation pod, the safety protocols having failed during a routine educational program. The child was experiencing a virtual reality scenario where she was falling through an endless void, unable to escape the illusion that felt completely real. Elena didn't hesitate. She climbed into the pod with Sarah, wrapping her arms around the terrified girl and projecting every ounce of love and protection she could through their bond. "I'm here, sweetheart. You're safe. I've got you." Sarah's virtual fall stopped immediately. The simulation couldn't continue when it detected that the child no longer believed herself to be alone and helpless. The bond between them had overridden the malfunction, using the power of their connection to rewrite the virtual reality around them. As they climbed out of the pod, Sarah looked up at Elena with wonder. "I could feel you coming to save me. Even when I couldn't see you or hear you, I knew you were there." "That's what family means among the Kethmora," Elena replied, finally beginning to understand the true depth of what they had committed to. No one is ever truly alone. That evening, as Elena tucked each of the children into their beds, she reflected on how much their lives had changed. They were no longer refugees or orphans. They were the first human members of the largest interstellar family in the galaxy, protected by bonds that transcended species and distance. But perhaps more importantly, they were healing. The trauma of losing their birth families would always be part of them, but it no longer defined them. They were learning to laugh again, to dream again, to trust that the future held possibilities beyond mere survival. As Elena made her own preparations for sleep, she felt the gentle presence of 18 children in her heart and mind. Some were already asleep, their dreams filled with new friends and incredible discoveries. Others were still awake, marveling at the day's lessons or quietly working through their emotions about their changed circumstances. All of them felt safe. All of them felt loved. All of them felt the unshakable certainty that they would never face the universe alone again. For the first time since the evacuation from Kepler 442b, Elena allowed herself to truly rest. The Velthar bond had made her more than she was before, not just a ship captain responsible for passengers, but a mother responsible for souls. It was a responsibility she embraced completely, knowing that these children would grow up to be bridges between worlds, ambassadors of human resilience and Kethmora wisdom. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as word of the Human-Kethmora alliance spread through the galaxy. But tonight, 18 hunter cubs slept safely beneath the guard of someone who would die before letting harm come to them. And across the galaxy, an entire civilization stood ready to honor that protection. The future, for the first time in months, looked bright. 6 weeks after the Velthar ceremony, the relative peace of Hadean 4 was shattered by an urgent transmission that made Elena's blood run cold. The message came through on an emergency frequency that only Earth's military commanders were supposed to know, and the voice belonged to Admiral Rodriguez, the highest-ranking officer left in the Earth Defense Force. "Captain Vasquez, if you're receiving this, then you're alive and I thank God for small miracles. The situation has deteriorated beyond our worst projections. The Zephyrian Collective has begun a coordinated assault on Earth itself. We're holding for now, but barely. More critically, intelligence suggests they're planning to hunt down any human survivors in the outer colonies. You and those children may be the last free humans in the galaxy." Elena felt the spike of fear and determination through her bonds with the children before she was even consciously aware of her own emotions. Across the settlement, 18 young voices called out in concern, and she knew they had felt her reaction through the Velthar connection. She found them gathered in the main hall of their residence, their Kethmora friends and teachers surrounding them with protective concern. Rebecca, now fluent in both spoken and color-pattern Kethmora communication, was translating rapidly between the species. "The pretty people are asking if Earth is our birth world," 10-year-old Marcus explained. "They want to know if our pack is in danger." Elena knelt in front of the assembled children, feeling their mix of fear, confusion, and surprisingly fierce determination. "Yes, Earth is where our species comes from, and yes, our people are in trouble. The same aliens who destroyed your colonies are now attacking our homeworld." David, the quiet 12-year-old who had become something of a leader among the older children, stepped forward. "What does this mean for us? Are we going to help them?" Before Elena could answer, Zethkar entered the hall, his skin patterns cycling through deep blues and silvers that Rebecca quickly identified as battle readiness and protective fury. Captain Vasquez, we have received the same transmission. The Kethmora Council of Guardians has been in emergency session since the message arrived. And, Alina asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. The collective has threatened cubs under our protection. They have declared war on the birth pack of our Velthar family. This cannot be permitted to stand. Zethkar's 4 arms spread wide in a gesture that conveyed absolute certainty. The Kethmora fleet will depart for Earth within the day. Alina felt a surge of gratitude so intense it made her dizzy, but also deep concern. Zethkar, this isn't your fight. We can't ask you to risk Kethmora lives for human problems. The High Counselor's skin shifted to brilliant gold patterns that made Rebecca gasp in translation. Captain, you still do not understand. When the Velthar ceremony was completed, the 18 cubs became Kethmora. Earth became the birth world of Kethmora citizens. An attack on Earth is an attack on us. Sarah, the 8-year-old artist, tugged on Alina's sleeve. Does this mean we're going home? Alina looked around at the children who had thrived so remarkably in their new environment. Rebecca was designing mathematical art with Kethmora professors. Marcus had learned to pilot Kethmora atmospheric craft. David was working on engineering projects that combined human creativity with Kethmora technology. They had found happiness here, a sense of belonging that she wasn't sure they could find anywhere else. That's something we need to discuss together, she said finally, as a family. The family meeting that followed was unlike anything Alina had ever experienced. With the Velthar bonds active, she could feel each child's thoughts and emotions as clearly as her own. The younger children were excited at the prospect of seeing Earth, but also afraid of leaving their new friends. The older children understood the strategic implications better and were wrestling with questions of duty, safety, and identity. I want to see where we came from, Marcus said finally, but I don't want to leave Silthy and the others. Maybe we don't have to choose, Rebecca suggested, her brilliant mind already working through possibilities. The Kethmora have instantaneous communication across the galaxy. Distance doesn't have to mean disconnection. David, ever practical, raised the crucial question. Captain Mom, are we going as passengers or as participants? Because if Earth is really in danger, we should be helping, not just watching. Alina felt a surge of pride at the maturity these children had developed. They weren't thinking like victims anymore. They were thinking like people who had responsibilities to others. The Kethmora fleet will need guides, she said slowly, working through the implications. People who understand human technology, human tactics, human psychology. You've all learned things here that could make the difference between victory and defeat. Over the next several hours, Alina worked with Zethkar and the children to develop a plan that would utilize their unique position as human Kethmora citizens. The children would serve as cultural consultants and technical advisors, helping Kethmora commanders understand human military doctrine and civilian psychology. More importantly, they would serve as proof that humans and Kethmora could work together, living symbols of the alliance that could inspire both species to fight harder for their shared future. The departure from Hadean 4 was emotional for everyone involved. The human children had formed deep friendships with their Kethmora classmates, bonds that transcended species as completely as their adoption had. But as Alina watched the children saying their goodbyes, she realized something remarkable was happening. The young Kethmora were demanding to come along. Silthy says she can't let Marcus go alone, Rebecca translated, as the young alien made emphatic color pattern arguments to her parents. She says that packmates protect each other, and Marcus is her packmate now. Similar scenes were playing out across the settlement, as young Kethmora appealed to their families for permission to join the expedition to Earth. Alina watched in amazement as alien parents struggled with the same protective instincts and fierce love that she felt for her own adopted children. In the end, 12 young Kethmora were granted permission to accompany the fleet, creating an unprecedented mixed crew of human and alien children who would serve together in humanity's darkest hour. The journey to Earth took 3 days through Kethmora hyperspace corridors, traveling at speeds that would have been impossible with human technology. Alina spent much of the trip working with Kethmora military commanders to develop integrated battle plans that could leverage both species' strengths. The humans' adaptability and unpredictability complemented the Kethmora's disciplined coordination perfectly. But it was the children who provided the most valuable insights, their innocent questions often revealing strategic possibilities that the adults had overlooked. "Why do the Zephyrians always attack the same way?" 8-year-old Tommy asked during one planning session. "That seems really boring." The question led to a breakthrough analysis of Zephyrian tactical doctrine, revealing predictable patterns that could be exploited. The collective's strength came from their overwhelming numbers and standardized equipment, but they had never learned to adapt quickly to unexpected responses. "Human cubs think like human adults," Morganth observed with satisfaction. "This will be the collective's undoing. They expect predictable responses from predictable minds. They will not know how to react to the chaos of human creativity guided by Kethmora wisdom." As they approached the solar system, Alina felt her heart clench at the sight that greeted them. Earth was surrounded by the twisted ships of the Zephyrian fleet, their biomechanical hulls scarred and pitted from their aggressive expansion across the galaxy. But Alina could also see human ships holding defensive positions around the Moon and Mars, fighting with the desperate courage of a species facing extinction. "Captain," the Kethmora fleet commander announced, "we are receiving a transmission from Earth Defense Command. They are surprised by our arrival." Alina smiled grimly. "Patch me through to Admiral Rodriguez." The Admiral's weathered face appeared on screen, his expression cycling through disbelief, hope, and tactical calculation in rapid succession. "Captain Vasquez, I don't know how you managed this, but your timing is perfect. We've been holding them off, but barely. What kind of support are you bringing?" 47 Kethmora warships, each more advanced than anything in our fleet," Alina replied. "Plus the most effective psychological warfare unit in the galaxy." "Psychological warfare?" Alina gestured to the children, both human and Kethmora, who had crowded around the communication screen. "Admiral, may I present the first citizens of the Human Kethmora Alliance? 18 human children who survived the Kepler 442b massacre, and 12 Kethmora younglings who chose to stand with their adopted packmates. Together, they represent everything we're fighting for, the future of both our species." Admiral Rodriguez stared at the mixed group of children for several seconds, then began to smile. "Captain, you never did anything the conventional way. I assume you have a plan." Alina felt the confidence and determination of 30 children flowing through her bonds, human and Kethmora alike. "Yes, sir. We're going to show the collective what happens when you threaten someone's children." The Battle of Earth was about to begin, but for the first time since the war started, Alina was confident of the outcome. The Zephyrian collective had made a fatal error in their calculations. They had expected to face a dying species fighting alone against impossible odds. Instead, they would face the combined might of two civilizations united by the strongest bonds in the universe: the love and protection of parents for their children, and the determination of children to protect the worlds they called home. As the Kethmora fleet moved into attack formation, and the human children took their positions as strategic advisors, Alina felt a fierce joy spreading through the Velthar network. Her cubs were no longer refugees or victims. They were warriors, diplomats, and bridges between worlds, about to fight for the future of everything they held dear. The collective was about to learn why no one dared approach hunter cubs sleeping beneath the guard of a Velthar, and why that protection extended to entire worlds when those cubs chose to make them their home. The Battle of Earth began not with massive fleet engagements or orbital bombardments, but with something the Zephyrian collective had never encountered before: a message broadcast simultaneously across every communication frequency they used. 18 human children and 12 Kethmora younglings stood together on the bridge of the Kethmora flagship, their image transmitted to every collective ship in the system. Rebecca, now fluent in 17 different languages including the collective's primary communication protocols, served as their spokesperson. "My name is Rebecca Martinez," she began, her young voice carrying clearly across space. "These are my brothers and sisters, human and Kethmora alike. We are the children of two worlds, protected by bonds that your collective cannot understand and can never break." Alina watched from beside Zethkar as the broadcast continued, feeling the mixture of determination and hope flowing through the Velthar bonds. The children had planned this message themselves, understanding instinctively that the first weapon in this war would be psychological. You have destroyed our colonies, Marcus added, his 7-year-old voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was saying. You have killed our birth parents and tried to make us afraid, but you have failed. We are not afraid anymore. We are protected by the love of two species, and we stand ready to defend our home. The reaction from the collective ships was immediate and telling. Their formations wavered as commanders tried to process this unexpected development. The Zephyrians had built their empire on fear and overwhelming force, grinding down resistance through terror and despair. They had no doctrine for dealing with defiant children broadcasting messages of hope and unity. David stepped forward next, his 12-year-old face bearing an expression of mature resolve. This is Earth, birthworld of humanity and adopted home of the Kethmora Alliance. You are not welcome here. Leave now and you will be allowed to depart safely. Continue your attack and you will face the consequences of threatening children under Kethmora protection. The response from the collective came in the form of weapons fire, massive energy beams lancing toward the human defense positions around Luna. But the shots never reached their targets. Kethmora shields, operating on principles of space-time manipulation that the collective couldn't counter, absorbed the attacks harmlessly. So much for diplomacy, Elena murmured, then opened a channel to all allied ships. All units execute Operation Family Protection. What followed was unlike any space battle in recorded history. The Kethmora fought with the disciplined precision of a species that had perfected warfare over millennia, but their tactics were constantly adapted and improvised based on suggestions from their human advisors, particularly the children, whose unconventional thinking kept catching the collective off guard. They're bunching up near Jupiter, 8-year-old Sarah observed, her artistic eye seeing patterns that the adults had missed. It looks like a flower closing up. Why would they do that? Her observation led to the realization that the collective was preparing for a massive coordinated jump, planning to appear directly in Earth's atmosphere and bypass the defense fleets entirely. The counter-strategy that resulted, using Kethmora gravity manipulators to create artificial asteroid fields in their projected emergence points, was devastating. Half the collective fleet materialized inside solid rock and was destroyed instantly. The remainder found themselves scattered and disorganized, easy targets for the coordinated human Kethmora response. But the real turning point came when the children's Kethmora friends demonstrated why their parents had allowed them to come on this dangerous mission. Young Silthy, Marcus's adopted packmate, revealed that she had been studying Zephyrian biotech during the journey to Earth. Their ships are alive, she explained through the translation interface Rebecca had developed. Not intelligent, alive like people, but organism alive like plants. They get scared when they're hurt, and scared organisms make bad decisions. This insight led to the development of new weapons that targeted the collective ship's biological components not to destroy them, but to trigger their panic responses. Suddenly, the supposedly implacable Zephyrian war machine began making tactical errors, their ships fleeing when they should have advanced, clustering together when they should have spread out. The battle raged for 6 hours, but the outcome was never really in doubt once the children's unconventional strategies were implemented. The Zephyrian collective, faced with enemies who refused to play by any rules they understood, began to fall apart at the psychological level before their ships were even significantly damaged. The end came when the collective's command ship, under attack from 3 Kethmora dreadnoughts, broadcast a surrender signal in 17 different languages. Elena felt a surge of triumph through the Velthar bonds as the children realized what was happening. "We won," Tommy whispered, his 6-year-old voice filled with wonder. "We actually won." Elena gathered all 30 children, human and Kethmora alike, in the observation deck as the surrender negotiations began. Below them, Earth spun peacefully in space, no longer under threat of destruction. Around them, the combined fleets of 2 species were working together to process the defeated collective forces. "What happens now?" David asked, ever practical. "I mean, we've saved Earth, but what comes next?" Elena felt the question resonate through all the children, human and alien alike. They had proven themselves in the crucible of battle, but more importantly, they had proven that the bonds between species could overcome any obstacle. Now they faced the challenge of peace. "Now we build something new," Elena replied. "The Kethmora and humanity working together with you as our ambassadors and guides. There are probably other species out there facing threats like the collective. Other children who need protection, other worlds that need defending. Rebecca's eyes lit up with the possibility. A galactic alliance based on the Velthar principles. Why not? Alina asked. You've already shown it can work. 18 human children and 12 Kethmora younglings just saved 2 civilizations by working together. Imagine what 100 species could accomplish using the same principles. Over the following weeks, as the immediate crisis was resolved and the collective was disbanded, the children found themselves at the center of something unprecedented in galactic history. Representatives from dozens of species came to Earth to study the human Kethmora alliance, drawn by stories of children who had bridges between worlds and parents who would protect any young ones in need. The Meridian's Edge asterisk, fully repaired with Kethmora technology, became the flagship of a new kind of fleet, not conquerors or explorers, but protectors. Alina found herself promoted from captain to admiral, commanding ships crewed by multiple species working together under the Velthar principles of family protection. But it was the children who became the true leaders of this new alliance. Rebecca established schools that taught cross-species communication and cooperation. Marcus founded rescue organizations dedicated to finding and protecting displaced young ones across the galaxy. David developed technologies that allowed different species to work together more effectively. Most importantly, they never forgot the lessons they had learned as orphaned refugees on an alien world. When new crises arose, and they always did, the response was always the same. Protect the vulnerable first. Create bonds that transcend species. Remember that family is defined not by blood, but by commitment. 5 years after the Battle of Earth, Alina stood in the same observation deck where she had watched the collective surrender, but now she wasn't alone. Around her stood not just her original 18 adopted children, but representatives from 47 different species who had joined the Galactic Protection Alliance. Some were former enemies who had been offered the chance to reform rather than face destruction. Others were new species just beginning their journey to the stars. All of them understood the central principle that the children had taught the galaxy. No young one should ever face the universe alone and unprotected. No species should have to choose between survival and abandoning their principles. And no family, however it was formed, should ever be broken by those who saw strength in cruelty. Marcus, now 12 and captain of his own rescue ship, appeared on the comm screen from somewhere in the Andromeda sector. Admiral Mom, we've got 18 Vorthan cubs here whose colony was just evacuated ahead of a nova, requesting permission to begin integration protocols. Alina smiled, feeling the familiar warmth of the Velthar bonds that now connected her to hundreds of children across dozens of species. Permission granted, Captain Marcus. Bring them home. Home, it was a word that had taken on new meaning over the years. Not a single planet or star system, but a network of connections that spanned the galaxy. Wherever there were children under Kethmora protection, wherever there were families bonded by choice rather than blood, wherever there were beings committed to protecting those who could not protect themselves, that was home. Through the observation deck's transparent walls, Alina could see dozens of ships from different species working together in Earth's orbit. Human engineering teams were installing Kethmora communication arrays on Theshan medical ships. Andromedal artists were teaching Kethmora children how to paint with quantum light. Young Vorthans were learning human games from the crew of Marcus's ship. Sarah, now 13 and the Alliance's chief cultural coordinator, joined Alina at the viewport. Her artistic talents had evolved into something approaching prescience, an ability to see how different species' cultures could blend and strengthen each other. "What are you thinking about?" Sarah asked, her question carrying the gentle empathy that had made her so effective at helping traumatized children from different worlds. "I'm thinking about that first night on Hadean 4, Alina replied. "When Zethkar told us that hunter cubs sleeping beneath our guard had found the strongest protection of all, I don't think any of us understood how literally he meant that." Sarah laughed, a sound filled with joy and confidence that would have been impossible 5 years ago. "I think we're the ones who made it literal. We took the metaphor and turned it into reality." Alina nodded, watching as another ship docked at the station, this one carrying a mixed crew of young beings from 6 different species, all working together under the guidance of former refugees who had learned that family was the strongest force in the universe. The collective had been wrong about many things, but their greatest error had been believing that strength came from domination and fear. The children of the Alliance had proven something far more profound. That true strength came from protection, love, and the willingness to call any lost child your own. As Alina prepared for her next mission, reports were coming in of a distant species facing extinction from an ancient automated defense system. She felt the familiar stirring of the Velthar bonds. Somewhere in the galaxy, children were in danger. Families were being threatened. Young ones faced the universe alone and afraid. But not for long. The hunter cubs had grown into guardians themselves, and their protection now extended across the stars. No child would sleep unguarded while the alliance endured, and Alina had every intention of making sure it endured forever. The greatest family in galactic history was still growing, one rescued child at a time.